Welcome to Something About Sleep. We hope you'll let our stories guide you to a nice, peaceful slumber as you learn about history and what it was like to be a human in times long since past. Now, I need to get to sleep, and if you're watching this video, chances are you do too. So, without further ado, take it away.
On tonight's episode, we will explore the quiet world around Genghis Khan, life in a Mongol steppe camp. So join me here by the fire and rest your weary eyes as I tell you a tale from long, long ago. There is a small mystery hidden inside the story of Genghis Khan. It is not the mystery of a lost treasure, or a vanished city, or a secret buried beneath a ruined palace. It is a quieter question. Before the name Genghis Khan travelled across continents, before it appeared in chronicles written in distant languages, before later generations began to imagine banners crossing the horizon, what did the world around him feel like on an ordinary morning? Perhaps the answer begins before sunrise. The steppe is still mostly dark. A faint line of grey rests low on the eastern horizon, but the grassland has not yet taken on its daytime colours. A few rounded dwellings stand near a low fire. Their outer coverings are made from felt, and the wind brushes softly across them before moving onward into the open country. Beyond the nearest dwelling, horses shift their weight in the cold air. You may hear a quiet snort, the small sound of leather tack, and the muted press of hooves against firm ground. No stone wall surrounds this place. No paved road leads toward it. There is no permanent gate to open in the morning, and yet this is not an improvised shelter at the edge of nowhere. It is a home, and a carefully ordered one. Its shape, its belongings, its animals, and its routines belong to a way of life adapted to movement across an enormous landscape. Tonight, we're going to spend some time in that world. This will not be a list of battles, and it will not be a rapid account of conquest. The larger history cannot be erased, and it should not be ignored. But it can remain at the far edge of the scene while we pay attention to things that are more easily overlooked. The early light on the grass, the warmth of a felt-covered dwelling, the people who knew how to dismantle a home and raise it again, the animals that sustained an encampment, the sound of milk poured into a bowl, the patience required to watch weather, and the particular kind of silence that settles over a camp when the fire has burned low. The figure known to much of the world as Genghis Khan began life with the name Temujin, often written Temujin. Historians commonly connect his proclamation as Chinggis Khan with a great assembly in 1206, after he had consolidated authority across the Mongolian steppe. The exact meaning of the title remains debated, although it is often translated in ways that suggest a universal or oceanic ruler. Before that gathering, it is useful to call him Temujin. Afterward, we can call him Chinggis Khan, while remembering that the spelling Genghis Khan is the familiar form found in English titles and conversation. The daily life surrounding Temujin has to be approached gently. No observer stood beside one particular campfire and recorded every motion of one ordinary day. The sources are incomplete. The secret history of the Mongols, the great narrative account of Temujin's early life, and the formation of the Mongol polity preserves traditions of remarkable value, but it is also literary, compressed, and at times saga-like. Later travellers described Mongol life from their own perspectives. Archaeology, environmental history, comparative study, and long continuities in pastoral practice help fill in parts of the picture, but they do not give us permission to pretend that every detail is certain. So the camp we are entering is a historically grounded reconstruction. It is not a single documented campsite frozen perfectly in time. Think of it instead as a quiet path into the early 13th century steppe, cautious where caution is needed, specific where the evidence allows specificity, and unhurried enough to notice the small things. Before we move any farther, settle into a comfortable position. Let the wide grasslands open slowly in your imagination. There's no need to follow every name or remember every detail. You can simply listen to the wind, the animals, and the steady rhythm of a camp beginning to wake. And while the first light gathers at the horizon, you're welcome to leave a comment with where you are listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. There is something fitting about imagining listeners in different places, under different skies, sharing the same quiet journey. If these calm history stories help you relax, you can also like the video and subscribe for more long-form journeys into the past. For now, the camp is still mostly asleep. Inside one of the dwellings, the fire has settled into a red glow. Outside, the horses are heard more clearly than they are seen. A dog lifts its head and then becomes still again. A thin strand of smoke rises into the cold air, bends with the breeze, and disappears. The grey line in the east slowly widens. There is one more reason to begin here, before the camp wakes. Famous lives often become crowded with later knowledge. We look backward and see a destination where the people living through the moment could see only another morning. The quiet camp corrects that distortion. It reminds us that Temujin did not begin as a monument. He began within a household, beneath weather, among animals, responsibilities, uncertainty, and the ordinary need to keep warm until sunrise. And as the darkness begins to loosen its hold on the landscape, we can look beyond the fire and notice the country itself. The steppe does not reveal itself all at once. At first, there is only distance. The horizon seems to rest in every direction, interrupted here and there by a low ridge, a river valley, a darker fold in the land, or the uncertain outline of hills far away. The sky feels larger because there are so few walls to limit it. As morning approaches, a faint silver light gathers above the grass. What had been one continuous darkness begins to separate into subtle layers. Ground, water, animal, dwelling, cloud. A person stepping outside at this hour would not see an empty wilderness. The land would be full of information. A shallow depression might hold moisture longer than the slope above it. Grass in one direction might appear cropped low from recent grazing, while another patch still offered enough for a flock to feed. A line of birds could suggest water. Tracks near the camp might reveal the movement of livestock during the night. The wind could carry a change in temperature or the promise of shifting weather. The state of the animals themselves mattered too. Their condition, their appetite, the strength of young animals, and the distance they could travel were not background details. They helped determine what the household needed to do next. Mobile pastoral life was not a matter of wandering aimlessly across a blank map. Families moved with purpose. Water, pasture, season, shelter, memory, and social relationships shaped the routes they followed. Some movements may have been relatively short. Others took households toward a different seasonal range. The timing varied by region and circumstance. There was no single calendar that every family followed in exactly the same way. What mattered was close attention. Knowing when a place had given what it could give, knowing when grass elsewhere might be ready, and knowing how to move before a problem became harder to solve. The eastern steppe and the regions of northern Mongolia associated with Temujin's youth contain rivers, forested areas, open grasslands, and changing terrain. The landscape is not one endless uniform plain. Valleys offer water and pasture. Hills interrupt the horizon. In some areas, forests provide wood and different kinds of shelter. Rivers form geographical threads through stories otherwise shaped by movement. Among them, the Anon River holds a particular place in the tradition surrounding Temujin. It belongs to the wider region of his early life, and it is linked to the assembly of 1206 at which he was proclaimed Chinggis Khan. But on this morning, the river is simply part of the land. Imagine walking a short distance from the encampment while the first full colours of dawn appear. The air is cool enough that each breath feels distinct. Grass bends in small waves beneath the breeze. Somewhere beyond the nearest rise, a flock begins to move, slowly at first, with a soft collective rustle. A rider can be seen at a distance, not hurrying, only checking the edge of the grazing animals. Because the land is open, the figure remains visible for a long time. A person may grow smaller against the horizon without fully disappearing. Distance works differently here. In a town, a building can vanish after someone turns a corner. In a forest, a person may be hidden by trees only a few steps away. On the steppe, movement can remain part of the view. A horse and rider become a dark vertical mark against the lighter grass. A cart may be noticed long before it arrives. A group of travellers can be watched carefully while they're still too far away for conversation. The landscape gives warning, but it also demands patience. The camp member looking outward in the morning is reading more than scenery. The question is practical. Is the nearby grass enough for today? Where are the horses? Has any animal strayed? Is the water source dependable? Has the wind shifted? Are clouds gathering over the hills? Has another group passed nearby? These observations are quiet, but they are not casual. Livestock form the foundation of life. A difficult winter, a dry period, or illness among animals could have serious consequences. The Mongolian term dzud is often used today for winter conditions that can cause major livestock losses, though we should be cautious about placing every modern term and category unchanged into the 13th century. The underlying reality is older and easier to understand. When a household depends deeply on its animals, weather becomes a matter of daily attention. There is no need to make this morning anxious. The camp has known wind before. The people moving through it are not waiting helplessly for the sky to decide their fate. They possess knowledge built through repetition. They know how to look for sheltered ground, how to judge the condition of a flock, how to remember water sources, and how to balance the needs of different animals. Their world is vulnerable in some ways, but it is also skilled. As the light strengthens, the grass changes colour. What seemed grey becomes pale green and gold. The rounded forms of the dwellings become clearer behind us. Smoke rises from more than one opening now. A person crosses between two carts carrying a vessel. Another checks a tether. The dog that had been quiet before dawn is moving around the edge of the camp, stopping now and then to listen. Farther away, birds rise from low ground and turn together in the morning air. Their motion catches the light for only a moment. Beneath them, the land slopes toward water. It is possible to think of the steppe as a place defined by absence. Few trees in the open areas, few permanent structures, few fixed roads. But for the people living here, it is better understood as a place of relationships. One patch of grass is connected to a later patch of grass. A river bend is connected to memory. A distant ridge can mark the direction of a seasonal journey. A known route may lead toward neighbours, relatives, trading partners, or political allies. A campsite carries traces of earlier use, even after the people who occupied it have gone. The land is remembered in motion. That is important for understanding the world around Temujin. Later histories often describe enormous movement across Eurasia. Messengers, armies, merchants, envoys and travellers crossed distances that astonished observers from settled societies. But long before movement became imperial in scale, it existed as a daily grammar. It began with the question of where animals could graze. It began with knowing how far a cart could travel over certain ground. It began with a child learning that the horizon was not a boundary, only the next part of a route. As the morning continues, the camp becomes more audible. A wooden object knocks gently against a cart. Leather creaks. A horse gives a short call from beyond the dwellings. Voices answer one another without urgency. The fire inside the nearest home is being encouraged back into a brighter flame. The day is still young, and there is no need to travel yet. But every object in the encampment has been shaped by the possibility of movement. The ropes can be untied, the felt can be folded, the wooden pieces can be lifted and carried, the carts can be checked, the animals can be gathered. The broad country teaches people to notice when it's time to stay and when it is time to go. The seasons would alter the land in ways an experienced household could feel before a stranger fully understood them. Spring brought its own demands as animals gave birth, and the survival of young livestock required close attention. Summer offered richer grazing and more abundant milk, but it also required movement, milking, processing, and the careful use of favourable conditions. Autumn turned attention toward preparation. Winter narrowed choices and made sheltered ground especially valuable. Even within the same season, two nearby areas could differ. A slope exposed to wind might lose snow more quickly in one circumstance and suffer more deeply in another. A river valley could provide water and grass, yet also demand caution when conditions changed. Forest steppe regions offered resources and shelter different from the drier expanses farther south. Families did not need a modern map to understand these distinctions. They carried a lived map, a map of remembered springs, campsites, crossings, protected hollows, grazing grounds, and places best avoided at particular times. Memory was often social. Knowledge moved through families and relationships. An older relative could remember how animals fared during a previous season. A visitor might describe the condition of pasture beyond the nearest ridge. Another camp's movement could provide information without requiring a formal message. The landscape was read not only with the eyes, but through conversation. This makes the broad grassland feel less empty with every step. A low hill has a history of shelter. A track can be evidence of animals, travellers, or a household already moving toward another range. A distant strand of smoke is a sign that someone else has made a decision about water and grass. The quietest view may contain many human choices. The quiet skill of choosing ground also has a visual side. A camp placed well seems almost to belong to the land, near enough to water, not so close that dampness becomes a problem, protected where possible from the strongest wind, and surrounded by grazing that can support the animals without exhausting the immediate area. The choice is temporary, but it is never careless. For now, we can turn back toward the low smoke and the rounded dwellings, and look more closely at a camp designed to travel without ceasing to feel like home. From a distance, the camp appears simple. A few circular dwellings rest against the grassland, their felt coverings muted in the morning light. Nearby stand carts with high wheels, bundles secured beneath coverings. saddles placed where they can be reached, and lines for tethering animals. A camel may be kneeling near a load. An ox shifts slowly beside a cart. The ground immediately around the dwellings is more worn than the grass beyond it, marked by hooves, footsteps, and repeated work. Nothing here is accidental, but not everything needs to be rigidly arranged. An ordinary family encampment was not the same thing as the elite mobile household that later surrounded a Khan. It is useful to keep those worlds distinct. The modest camp we are walking through contains the practical organization of pastoral life. Later, as Temujin's authority expands, we will see how a more complex royal or elite encampment, often described with the term ordu, could gather guards, visitors, craftspeople, messengers, and political obligations around the household of a ruler. For now, the scale remains intimate. The first impression is portability. A home on the steppe needed to provide shelter from wind, cold, sun, and sudden weather. But it also needed to be dismantled and moved. Household objects needed to survive repeated handling. The most valued belongings were not necessarily small, but they had to belong to a mobile life. Wooden chests, leather bags, felt coverings, rugs, bowls, tools, bedding, rope, bridles, saddles, cooking vessels, and clothing formed part of a world in which usefulness and memory often travelled together. Imagine one person bending to inspect a leather strap where it passes around part of a cart. The motion is unhurried. The strap does not need to be replaced today, but its condition matters. Another person runs a hand along a wheel, checking where wood joins wood. Someone else lifts a length of rope, feels its roughness, and sets it aside for mending. The felt covering of a dwelling is examined at the lower edge where damp ground and repeated packing might wear it more quickly. Maintenance is one of the quiet rhythms of the encampment. A mobile life is sometimes described as though it were lighter than a settled one, as if people simply lifted a tent and moved on. But a durable household requires planning. Felt must be made and repaired. Wooden components must be protected. Harness must fit the animals that pull or carry loads. Containers must hold food and liquid. Clothing must be suited to wind and cold. Small objects cannot be scattered carelessly when the next journey may cross uneven ground. The camp is a place of repeated preparation, even on days when it stays exactly where it is. Near one dwelling, a cart holds part of the household's stored world. Oxen could be used to pull carts in suitable regions, and yaks served similar purposes where conditions allowed. The Bactrian camel, with its 2 humps and patient strength, was especially valuable in areas where heavy loads had to cross difficult or dry terrain. Camels could help transport folded dwellings, furnishings, provisions, and trade goods. They were not present in identical numbers in every household or every region, but they belong to the larger pastoral economy of Mongolia and Inner Asia. A camel at rest has a stillness that suits the morning. Its load has not yet been fastened. Its long neck turns slightly toward the activity of the camp. Nearby, the heavier pace of an ox contrasts with the quicker movements of horses farther out. Each animal contributes differently. The horse gives range and speed. The camel bears weight across demanding ground. The ox pulls. Sheep, goats, cattle, and other livestock sustain the household in different ways. The camp is not built around one animal alone, even if the horse will eventually draw the most attention. Walk slowly between the dwellings and notice the surfaces. The ground near the fire is darkened and compacted. Felt carries a woolly, weathered smell. Leather has its own dry, earthy scent. Smoke has entered clothing, coverings, and hair so gradually that it belongs to the atmosphere rather than standing apart from it. Somewhere, a metal fitting gives a light sound as tack is lifted. A vessel is placed down on wood. A child moves past carrying something small and important enough to hold with both hands. The rounded dwellings are commonly called jers in Mongolian. In English, many listeners know them by the word yurt, a term with Turkic roots. The circular form, the wooden lattice walls, the roof poles and the felt covering create a shelter suited to repeated movement. The exact details of dwellings, carts and encampment layouts could vary across communities and periods. We should resist the temptation to turn a living landscape into a diagram with one fixed arrangement. Still, the central principle is clear. Shelter could be strong without being permanent, and a household could be rooted in practice rather than anchored to a single plot of ground. This is one of the most striking features of steppe life. Home is portable, but it is not temporary in the casual sense. It carries continuity. A family may leave one campsite and arrive at another. The view from the doorway changes. The river may lie in a different direction. The nearest ridge may be lower or higher. The quality of the grass changes beneath the animals. But the familiar wooden framework rises again. Felt covers the circular walls. Bedding is unfolded. Vessels find their places. A hearth becomes the centre of the interior. Smoke rises through the opening above. The household gathers within a shape it knows. Movement does not erase order. It reveals how carefully order has been designed. The encampment also holds a social geography. People know which household belongs to whom. They know which animals require attention and which cart contains certain supplies. They recognize the sound of familiar voices through the felt walls. They notice when a visitor approaches. They understand what work should be done now, what can wait until later, and what must be remembered before the next move. Some items are modest and repaired many times. Others may reflect exchange with settled neighbours or the wealth of a particular household. Textiles, metal objects and crafted goods could move into steppe communities through trade, tribute, gift-giving or political relationships. The steppe was not sealed away from towns and agricultural regions. Its inhabitants depended on animals, but they also understood exchange. A mobile camp could contain objects whose journeys began far beyond the nearest horizon. For the moment, there are no visitors. Morning has settled fully over the grass. A person lifts the edge of a covering and steps into the nearest dwelling. The outer wind softens almost immediately. The circular interior gathers the light differently from the open sky. A small fire glows at the centre, and the felt walls turn the enormous landscape into something warm, close, and human. The cart deserves a closer look because it carries a household's future in a very literal way. Wood must endure vibration, weight, uneven ground, dampness, and repair. A wheel that fails during movement creates a problem not only for the cart, but for the animals, people, food, and shelter distributed around it. A person examining a wheel in the morning is protecting far more than an object. Bundles also reveal a kind of practical intelligence. Goods that will be needed immediately after arrival should not disappear beneath everything else. Fragile items require protection. Weight must be balanced. The household has to anticipate weather during the journey and the sequence of rebuilding at the destination. This knowledge may be carried so fluently that it looks effortless, but fluency is the result of long practice. Even the camp's apparent informality has structure. Animals are not placed carelessly where they will tangle with carts or disturb the dwellings. Fires require attention. Paths form through repetition. People know where to walk in darkness. A visitor entering the camp may not understand every relationship at once, but household members move through it with the familiarity of people who have built the same order many times. Clothing belongs to this portable logic too. Garments had to protect the body while allowing a person to ride, work and move easily between the open air and the warmth of the gyre. Wool, felt, leather, skins and traded fabrics could all play a part. Valuable jewellery or small crafted objects could also serve as portable wealth, especially for elite households. In a mobile society, an object that can be carried safely may preserve value in a particularly useful form. A household's possessions can reveal its connections. A traded textile may lie beside a tool repaired locally. A wooden chest may hold small valuables beside ordinary necessities. The mixture matters. Steppe life was not a rejection of crafted goods from settled regions. It was a way of selecting, adapting, and carrying what remained useful across movement. We can follow quietly inside. Inside the gyre, the morning arrives slowly. The first light does not flood the space. It enters in narrow, softened ways. Through the doorway when the covering is lifted, through the opening at the roof where smoke finds its way out, and through small changes in the felt walls as the world outside becomes brighter. For a little while the interior seems to belong to two times at once. The fire remembers the night. The pale light belongs to the day. The dwelling is circular. Wooden lattice sections form the walls. Roof poles rise inward toward a central crown, leaving an opening above the hearth. The structure is light enough to take apart and move, but strong enough to meet the demands of the open country. Felt coverings made from wool soften the wind and hold warmth within the shelter. From outside, the gyre appears modest. From inside, its round shape creates a sense of completion. There is no distant corner. The hearth occupies the centre, not as decoration, but as necessity. It provides heat, a place for cooking, and a natural point around which people gather. Smoke rises upward, sometimes cleanly, sometimes lingering for a moment before finding the roof opening. The fire is not large. Fuel is valuable, and the purpose is steady warmth rather than spectacle. Dried animal dung could be gathered and used when wood was scarce or inconvenient to obtain. The material may sound humble to listeners accustomed to fireplaces stacked with cut logs, but on the grassland it was practical, portable, and closely connected to the animals that sustained the household. A vessel rests near the fire. It has been used many times. Its surface is darkened by smoke and handling. Beside it lie bowls, leather containers and small tools. Bedding has been folded back. Clothing is being adjusted for the day. A wooden chest holds items that need to remain protected when the camp moves. Nothing needs to be described as luxurious to feel valuable. A bowl that has survived years of travel, a carefully repaired strap, or a blanket made from felt carries a different kind of richness, the richness of continued use. The interior does not have to be imagined as sparse. Portable does not mean empty. Rugs, coverings, bags, storage containers, tools, clothing, food, and personal belongings can all find a place within a household prepared to travel. But the arrangement is disciplined by the realities of movement. Each object has weight. Each object must be packed. Each object that breaks must be repaired or replaced. The gyre teaches a quiet economy of attention. Felt is one of the materials that makes this world possible. Wool from sheep can be cleaned, worked, pressed, and transformed into a dense covering. Felt can be used for the outer layers of a dwelling, for rugs and blankets, and for other practical goods. Its usefulness is especially clear in a landscape where wind is constant and temperatures can change sharply. The material is not delicate. It bends, folds, insulates, and accepts repair. When it carries smoke, dust, and weather, those marks become part of its life. Imagine a hand pressing against the inner wall where the felt overlaps. The surface is thick and slightly uneven. Beyond it, the wind continues across the grass. Within it, the sound is reduced. A person sitting near the fire hears the camp differently from someone standing outside. Hooves become softer. Voices arrive through layers. The creak of a cart is recognizable but distant. This contrast between inside and outside is one of the gentle themes of the steppe. The landscape is enormous. The shelter is intimate. The sky stretches far beyond what the eye can hold, while the gyr gathers people into a circular space measured in steps. Neither cancels the other. The meaning of one is sharpened by the presence of the other. The exact household arrangements of early 13th century Mongols cannot be reconstructed perfectly. Later descriptions and modern continuities are useful, but caution matters. Customs documented much later should not be projected backward automatically. A doorway may have had a preferred orientation in many contexts. Objects may have been arranged according to habits that carried cultural meaning. Hospitality may have followed familiar patterns, yet the script of one imagined morning should remain flexible enough to respect variation. We're not entering a museum display. We're visiting a living household. A person near the hearth leans forward and adjusts the fire. Another folds a covering. Low conversation passes between them. Someone outside walks close enough that a shadow crosses the doorway for a moment and then moves away. The air smells faintly of smoke, felt, leather, and warm liquid. Nothing dramatic needs to happen. The usefulness of the space is the story. The gyr also changes with the season. In colder weather, the desire to hold warmth becomes more urgent. In milder conditions, coverings and openings can be managed differently. The shelter is not a fixed object placed against nature. It is part of an ongoing negotiation with weather. The household knows when wind is rising. It knows how dampness feels in the felt. It knows what must be dried, folded, tightened, or mended before movement resumes. Children learn the interior through repetition. They learn where not to step too quickly near the fire. They learn which objects belong to ordinary tasks. They learn that some items are light enough for them to carry when the family moves. They learn the texture of rope and wool before they understand the wider economy those materials represent. Knowledge enters through hands as much as through explanation. Older relatives carry memories of other campsites. Perhaps a particular chest was present beside another river years before. Perhaps a covering has been repaired with wool worked during a different season. Perhaps a bowl came through exchange with a neighbouring community or a merchant. The mobile household does not leave its past behind each time it travels. It folds parts of that past into bundles and takes them onward. Outside, the sounds are increasing. Sheep move together with a soft, uneven murmur. A goat calls sharply once and then falls quiet. Horses farther away shift and answer one another. The camp is entering the active part of the morning. People will step beyond the shelter to attend to animals, check water, prepare food, mend equipment, and decide what the day requires. Before following them, remain for another moment beside the fire. The roof poles meet above like lines drawn toward the sky. Smoke turns slowly and rises. The light has strengthened enough to reveal the grain of wood and the worn edge of a container. The felt wall moves almost imperceptibly as wind passes outside. Then the doorway opens again. Felt making also links the interior to a wider circle of labour. Wool has to be gathered, cleaned, and worked. Fibres are pressed and matted into a material dense enough to serve as covering, bedding, rug, or insulation. The process is physical and communal. A finished piece of felt contains the flock, the season, the labour of many hands, and the future weather it is expected to resist. The hearth has its own quiet logic as well. A central fire demands careful movement. Smoke is useful and persistent. Warmth gathers unevenly. A person entering from the open air feels the difference immediately, while someone who has remained inside notices subtler changes. A draft at the doorway, the moment the fuel settles, the need to stir or add to the fire, the gradual warming of a vessel. Light moves around the circular interior over the course of the day. Morning makes one surface visible. Midday reveals another. Near evening, the fire regains importance as the outside brightness diminishes. The same jar can feel like a sheltered workshop, a kitchen, a storage room, and a resting place without changing its form. The doorway is a threshold between two kinds of awareness. Inside, attention gathers around warmth, food, family, and objects close enough to touch. Outside, attention stretches toward animals, weather, and the horizon. People cross between these scales throughout the day. Each return to the ger offers a brief compression of the world, and each step back outside restores its breadth. At night, this same dwelling that served as workshop and kitchen becomes a place of sleep. Its circular walls do not divide the household into many separate rooms. Privacy, rest, conversation, and work have to be managed within a shared space. This closeness shapes the emotional life of the camp as surely as the wind shapes its outer coverings. Cool air enters, the sounds of the herd become clearer, and the circular warmth of the dwelling gives way once more to the wide country beyond it. The camp opens outward into animals. At first, the movement seems scattered. A flock bends and reforms as it crosses a patch of grass. A few goats separate themselves from the sheep, then drift back toward the larger group. Cattle stand with a heavier stillness. Somewhere near the edge of the encampment, a camel turns its head toward the wind. Horses remain farther out, some close enough to see clearly, and others reduced to small shapes against the land. To understand daily life on the steppe, it helps to begin not with a rider, but with a flock. Sheep were central to pastoral life. They provided meat, milk in some contexts, hides, skins, and wool. That wool could become felt, and felt could become the outer protection of a home. A sheep moving quietly through the grass might therefore be connected in time to warmth inside a year, to a blanket laid out at night, or to a covering folded onto a cart when the camp moved. The animal was not a single-purpose resource. It belonged to an interwoven household economy. A flock does not care for itself simply because grass is visible. Someone must watch where it grazes. Someone must notice when an animal lags behind. Someone must recognize the condition of young animals, the health of mothers, and the effect of weather. The survival of newborn livestock matters deeply in a pastoral world. Encouraging a ewe to nurse a young animal, finding shelter when conditions turn difficult, or keeping a flock from spreading too far across uneven terrain requires patience and experience. The knowledge is practical, but it is also attentive. It asks a person to look closely at small changes. Walk beside the flock for a while. The animals produce a layered sound, the clipping of grass, the dull rhythm of hooves, the occasional call, the slight disturbance of wind moving over wool. A dog stays near the outer edge, alert without needing to run. The herder does not force the flock forward quickly. The day is still cool. There is time to let the animals feed. Goats may be present in smaller numbers. They provide milk, meat, and skins, but their needs and grazing habits differ from those of sheep. Later history, especially the modern Kashmir economy, can easily shape how people imagine goats in Mongolia. For an early 13th century camp, it is better to remain with the simpler picture. A mixed herd managed carefully, its proportions influenced by region, season, wealth, and the household circumstances. Cattle and oxen enter the scene at a slower pace. Where grazing conditions are suitable, they can provide milk and meat, while oxen can pull carts during migration. Yaks belong especially to regions where the landscape supports them. They too can contribute milk, meat, and transport. There is no need to place every possible animal into a single encampment. Pastoral households were not identical. Their animals reflected terrain and opportunity. Still, the variety matters because different animals answer different needs. The camel is perhaps the easiest to notice from a distance. The Bactrian camel, with 2 humps and a deliberate gait, is well suited to carrying heavy loads through demanding terrain, including dry regions where water and grazing may be limited. A household moving with folded dwellings, furnishings, food, and trade goods benefits from an animal able to bear weight patiently. The camel also contributes wool, milk, and meat, but this morning its most visible quality is calm endurance. A camel kneels while a strap is adjusted. Its long legs are folded beneath it. A bundle rests nearby. The person working beside the animal checks the fastening and then steps back. The camel waits with an expression that seems almost contemplative, though we should be careful not to imagine too much human feeling into it. Its usefulness is enough. It belongs to a world where a home may have to cross difficult ground. The herd is also wealth. In a settled agricultural society, fields, buildings, irrigation, grain stores, and land rights may form the visible basis of livelihood. On the steppe, animals are moving stores of value and possibility. They reproduce. They provide food and material. They transport goods. They make movement possible. Their condition determines the condition of the household. A family with strong herds has options. A family that loses too many animals faces a narrower future. This is why the morning work contains no wasted attention. A person pauses to examine a hoof. Another looks over the back of an animal that seems thinner than the others. A child helps guide a few sheep away from a patch of ground where they have clustered too closely. Someone gathers dry dung for fuel, a necessary task in places where wood is not abundant. The work may be repetitive, but it is never meaningless. Each small action holds the camp together. The grassland makes these relationships visible. There is no barn hiding the animals from view. No high wall separates the household from the flock. The animals surround the dwellings, move outward from them, and return toward them. Their sounds enter the ear. Their needs shape the day. Their movement changes the appearance of the land. Season changes the rhythm. During a favourable period, the work may feel generous. Grass stands high enough for animals to feed well. Milk is available. Young livestock gain strength. The air is mild, and the household can prepare stores with the future in mind. In a harder period, every decision becomes more exact. Pasture must be protected from overuse. Shelter matters more. Distance matters more. The camp may move sooner than expected. A pastoral household is not simply reacting to nature. It is managing relationships among animals, land, time, and people. This skill can be easy to underestimate because its tools are familiar. Rope, knowledge, dogs, carts, hands, horses, and repeated observation. There is no single monumental structure to point toward. Yet the endurance of the camp depends on the accuracy of ordinary judgment. To know the flock is to know the future in a practical, immediate way. The animals also carry emotional weight. A strong horse, a dependable camel, a healthy flock, or the safe survival of young animals would not be viewed only as numbers in an inventory. They represent continuity. People have watched them through weather. They have helped birth, feed, gather, and protect them. They know their habits. The relationship can be practical and familiar at the same time. We do not need to romanticize it. Animals also provide meat, hides, and other necessities. Pastoral life depends on use as well as care. But a calm account can acknowledge both realities without dwelling on the harshest details. The daily feeling of the camp lies in attention. Animals are observed because they matter. As the sun rises higher, the sheep spread into a broader line across the grass. Their movement is almost like water passing slowly over uneven ground. The goats remain more restless. An ox lowers its head. The camel's load is secured. The dog sits for a moment, watching. Then a quicker sound carries from beyond the flock. Hooves strike firmer ground. A few riders are moving toward horses that have grazed farther from the encampment. The animals lift their heads as the riders approach. Some turn away at first. Others stand quietly, their breath briefly visible in the cool morning air. The flock has shown us the foundation of the household. The work of herding also changes across the day. In the cool morning, animals move outward toward grazing. Later, attention turns toward water, shade where it is available, the condition of young animals, and the way the flock spreads across the land. At evening, the household wants to know that livestock are gathered safely enough for night. This does not always mean bringing every animal into one tight enclosure. It means maintaining awareness. Predators belong at the edge of the story. Dogs helped protect flocks, and herders understood the risks posed by wolves and other threats. There is no need to turn the grassland into a place of constant danger. The more revealing image is the watchful dog, alert because the household has learned not to take the safety of young animals for granted. Dung gathered for fuel is another example of the pastoral economy's completeness. What animals leave behind can warm the jar and cook food. Wool becomes felt. Hides and skins become useful material. Milk becomes nourishment in several forms. Strength becomes transport. A household survives through careful use rather than waste. The animals also set limits. A flock cannot be pushed indefinitely. Grazing ground cannot be treated as inexhaustible. A route that works for riders alone may be poor for carts or young livestock. The health of the slowest animals shapes decisions made by the whole camp. Pastoral mobility is therefore not freedom from constraint. It is skillful movement within constraint. Different animals also ask different questions of the herder. Sheep tend to move as a flock. Goats may press toward different grazing. Cattle and yaks require suitable ground. Camels tolerate conditions that would burden other animals, but their loads still need judgment. Horses can spread far from camp because their mobility is part of their value. Herding is therefore not one task repeated mechanically. It is a collection of related forms of attention. Milk-producing animals require another kind of daily schedule. Milking cannot simply be postponed because other work feels more interesting. Containers need to be ready. Young animals must be considered. The useful abundance of a favourable season brings additional labour with it. Prosperity on the steppe often looks like more work performed carefully, not less. Now the horse will change our sense of distance. The horses are not all beside the dwellings. Some have grazed farther out, where the grass has not been disturbed by the closer flock. In the open country, a line of horses can loosen and spread until individual animals appear separate from one another, each lowering its head, stepping forward and lowering its head again. From the camp they may seem to be standing still. As the riders approach, the pattern begins to change. A horse lifts its head and listens. Another turns slightly away. The riders do not need to hurry. Their work is familiar. They move at an easy pace, watching the animals' responses and adjusting their direction. The sound of hooves remains measured. A pole with a loop or lasso might be carried for gathering horses. Leather tack is checked. A strap is tightened. A hand passes briefly along an animal's neck. Before the horse became an emblem of Mongol warfare in distant chronicles, it belonged to the practical life of the steppe. Horses allowed people to manage animals spread over wide grazing areas. They made it possible to search for pasture, carry news, visit neighbouring camps, hunt, escort carts, and move across distances that would feel very different on foot. They were not merely transportation. They changed the scale at which a household could operate. A person walking away from camp must think carefully about the return journey. A rider on a strong horse inhabits a wider circle. With remounts, that circle widens again. Multiple horses mattered because one animal could rest while another carried the rider onward. The ability to move did not erase distance, but it altered its meaning. Imagine following one rider beyond the nearest rise. The camp becomes smaller behind us. The gers settle into the grass like pale, rounded stones. Smoke thins as it rises. The flock spreads on one side of the encampment, while the carts and heavier animals remain nearer the dwellings. Ahead the land opens again. A low valley runs between two slopes. Horses graze along its edge where the grass is still cool with morning. The rider slows. There is no urgency in the scene. The horse beneath the rider breathes steadily. Its coat holds the soft light. It lowers its head when given the chance to graze. The rider waits, looking outward. Far away, another figure moves across the slope. The distance between them would feel inconvenient in many landscapes. Here it is ordinary. Children in pastoral communities could learn to ride early. This was not necessarily a ceremonial moment set apart from daily life. Skills grew from need and repetition. A child watched older riders handle tack, approach animals, balance, and guide a horse across uneven ground. Over time, the child began to assist with tasks such as gathering horses or keeping an eye on animals closer to camp. The competence that later impressed outsiders began as part of a working household. The learning was physical. A rider learned the feel of a horse shifting beneath them. They learned how wind changes on a slope. They learned to notice when an animal is tired, when its breathing seems wrong, or when a strap rubs where it should not. They learned to allow a horse to feed. Steppe mobility depended on hardy, grass-fed animals, and the relationship between movement and grazing was constant. This is a useful place to slow down. History can make horses seem like instruments, always carrying someone toward a destination. But most of a horse's day is not a dramatic journey. It grazes, it drinks, it stands in the wind. It flicks its ears at sounds too faint for a person to hear. It rests. A rider who depends on it understands that travel includes waiting. The horse line near camp is a place of work. Saddles are placed down and lifted again, bridles are examined, leather is softened, repaired, or replaced. A young person watches how a knot is tied. An older rider notices a small problem before it becomes a larger one. The ordinary care of equipment forms the quiet underside of mobility. Horses also shape social life. A visitor arriving at an encampment is noticed first as a moving speck, then as a rider, then perhaps as a familiar person. News travels on horseback. Gifts and messages arrive. Relatives visit. Alliances are maintained across space. A camp may feel remote without being isolated. Later, mounted mobility would become one of the great advantages of Mongol armies. Riders accustomed to distance, remounts, grazing, and coordinated movement could travel with a flexibility that challenged larger settled states. The hardy horses of the steppe were essential to that reach. But it is important not to let warfare consume the image. The military usefulness of horses grew from a deeper foundation. The horse was already present in herding, travel, childhood, hunting, communication, and memory. A young Temujin would have grown up in a world measured partly through horses. The Secret History preserves episodes in which horses matter not only as property, but as turning points in relationships. One famous story tells of stolen horses and of the young ordu who helped Temujin recover them and became a loyal companion. Like many episodes in the Secret History, the scene should be read with an awareness of its literary shape, yet its choice of subject is revealing. Horses are not incidental. They belong to the structure of life and loyalty. This morning no horses have been stolen. No difficult journey begins. A few are being gathered. Others remain at pasture. The riders speak quietly to one another as they turn back toward the camp. The route home is easy to follow because smoke rises above the dwellings and the slope offers a clear view. A rider becomes briefly silhouetted against the sky, then descends toward lower ground. The movement is graceful without being theatrical. Hooves press into earth, softened in places by dew. Tack gives a small creak with each shift of weight. One horse tosses its head. Another follows calmly. The riders do not need to force a straight line. As they near the encampment, the sounds of other work return. Sheep call from the edge of the flock. A camel shifts under a fastened load. Someone near the dwelling lifts a lid from a vessel and steam enters the cool air. The horse has carried us outward and brought us back again. It has shown how the steppe expands around the rider, how children grow into the skills their world requires, and how daily routines can quietly prepare a society for movement on a far greater scale. Hunting belongs quietly within this mounted world as well. It could provide food, sharpen cooperation, and offer elite riders a way to display competence. Large collective hunts later carried political and military significance, but the ordinary connection is simpler. People who ride across open country notice animal tracks, seasonal movement, and the changing condition of the land. A horse allows the rider to follow those signs farther. Remounts deepen the sense of range. A rider does not ask one horse to do everything. Animals can be rotated, rested, and allowed to graze. This practice would later support rapid communication and military mobility, but its roots are pastoral. The camp already understands that endurance comes from management, not from forcing one animal endlessly onward. There is also a quiet intimacy in identifying horses at a distance. Colour, gait, behaviour, and grouping help. Experienced eyes distinguish one animal from another. A horse that looks like a small mark to us may be immediately recognisable to the person riding toward it. The landscape is spacious, but it is not anonymous. When the riders return, they carry new information without needing a written report. They've seen the condition of distant grazing. They know where animals have spread. They may have noticed tracks, travellers, or weather on the far side of a rise. Riding is transportation, but it is also observation. Tack carries traces of this long familiarity. A saddle is not admired only for appearance. Its balance affects rider and horse. A bridle must work without causing avoidable harm. A knot must hold when wind, weight, and motion test it. Leather darkens with use. Metal fittings grow smooth where hands return to them. The equipment is ordinary enough to be overlooked and essential enough to receive constant care. The rider's posture also reflects adaptation. A person who has spent years on horseback does not experience riding as a rare excursion. Balance becomes ordinary. The motion of the horse enters the body's memory. This familiarity helps explain why travel, herding, hunting, and later coordinated campaigns could be approached with such confidence, even across demanding ground. Now, as the morning turns toward midday, the camp gathers around food, warmth, and the obligations of hospitality. By midday, the light has changed. The grey coolness of early morning has lifted from the grass. The sky seems higher, and the shadows near the dwellings have shortened. Riders return at an easy pace. The flock continues to feed. The work does not stop, but it gathers for a while around the possibility of a meal. Inside the gyre, the central fire is practical again. A vessel warms above it. Steam gathers and disappears. Bowls are set within reach. Someone checks the contents of a leather container. Another person enters briefly from outside, bringing the scent of grass and animals into the shelter before the doorway falls closed behind them. Food on the steppe begins with season. There is no single menu that every household would have eaten every day. The condition of the herds, the time of year, the location of the camp, the wealth of the family, and access to trade all shaped what was available. Still, animal products form the heart of pastoral life. Milk could become many things. Meat could be prepared, shared, preserved, and stretched across time. A warm broth could gather a household together when the wind outside made the shelter feel especially welcome. Milk was not one uniform substance. Sheep, goats, cattle, yaks in suitable regions, camels and mares could all contribute in different settings. Milk might be consumed fresh, processed into curds, dried into durable forms, made into cheese-like foods, or allowed to ferment. The purpose was not only variety. Processing helped turn a seasonal abundance into nourishment that could travel and last. Mare's milk holds a special place in descriptions of Mongol pastoral life. During the milking season, mares could be milked repeatedly. Much of the milk was fermented into a drink often known in Mongolian contexts as ayrag, and elsewhere by related names such as kumis. Its taste, texture, and strength can vary. It should not be treated as an exotic curiosity placed in the scene merely to impress the listener. It belongs naturally to a household economy built around animals, seasonality, and the skill of making use of what the herds provide. Imagine a bowl being offered. The drink is pale. The bowl is held with care. A traveller who has approached the encampment may receive something before conversation turns toward news or business. Hospitality matters in a landscape of distance. A person arriving from the horizon has crossed open ground. Their horse needs attention. The rider needs a place to sit, a chance to drink, and the reassurance that they have entered a human circle rather than remained outside it. The visitor does not need to be important. Perhaps the rider comes from a nearby encampment. Perhaps the message is ordinary. Information about grazing, relatives, animals, or movement along a familiar route. The larger political world has not yet entered our story. For now, hospitality is local and practical. A bowl changes hands. A few quiet words follow. Meat also belongs to the meal, especially mutton in many contexts. But there is no need to dwell on preparation in a graphic way. Stay with the warmth of broth, the steam rising from a vessel, and the way food makes time slow for a moment. Dried or preserved foods could support movement. Fat mattered in a demanding climate. A simple meal did not mean an unimportant one. Nourishment was tied directly to the health of the herd and the labour of the people who cared for it. The diet could be supplemented through exchange with settled regions and neighbouring communities. Grain, crafted goods, textiles, and other products moved across the boundaries between pastoral and agricultural worlds. Those boundaries were not sealed. Nomadic societies and settled societies could distrust one another, compete, trade, negotiate, and depend on one another at the same time. A household far from a town could still possess an object or ingredient whose journey began in a cultivated valley or a workshop. Perhaps a small amount of grain enters the meal. Perhaps it does not. The point is not to create a lavish table. It is to remember that the steppe existed within a wider web of exchange. The guest sits near the hearth. Outside, a horse is being led toward water or grazing. Someone has taken the bridle and will keep an eye on the animal while the rider rests. The gesture is quiet but meaningful. Hospitality extends beyond the person to the creature that carried them. The interior of the ger changes when a visitor arrives. It is still intimate, but the circle expands. A story or piece of news enters with the rider. A household member asks a question. Another listens while continuing to work. Children may look toward the guest with curiosity, then return to the tasks expected of them. The fire continues to settle and flare in small cycles. Food provides a pause, not an interruption. Work remains visible through the doorway. Animals shift in the sunlight. A person passes carrying a bundle. A dog lies down in the worn earth near the entrance, alert enough to lift its head when a new sound travels across the camp. The rhythms of the encampment do not stop for a formal meal in the way a town workshop might close its door. Eating belongs within the larger pattern of tending, mending, watching, and preparing. This is also a good moment to think about storage. A mobile household cannot depend on a pantry built into stone walls. Food must be stored in containers suited to movement. Some products are valuable because they are durable. Dried curds and other processed dairy foods can travel. Preserved meat can carry nourishment across seasons. Leather vessels and bags have to be protected, cleaned, and packed. The skill of feeding a household includes the skill of making food move with it. The meal is therefore connected to migration even when no one is travelling. A bowl near the fire is connected to the flock on the grass. The flock is connected to the condition of pasture. Pasture is connected to memory of other grazing grounds. The next journey is connected to the strength of the animals that will pull carts, carry loads, and bear riders. Nothing exists by itself. The visitor may bring another kind of connection. Perhaps someone in a nearby camp has seen a group of travellers. Perhaps a route toward a river remains clear. Perhaps there is news of a family preparing to move. Conversation unfolds without urgency. In an open landscape, information can be as practical as rope. Knowing who has passed, where animals have gone, and what conditions lie ahead helps a household make decisions. After a while, the bowl is set down. The rider will not remain forever. the people of the household will return fully to their work. The warmth of the meal becomes part of the day rather than a scene set apart from it. Outside, the sunlight reveals how much labour continues around the camp. Someone is working wool. Someone checks a cart. A child follows an older relative with a small task. An animal needs attention. A strap needs mending. A covering must be folded or dried. The life of the encampment depends on hands that remember what to do. Processing food takes time, and that time gives the camp another rhythm. Milk must be handled soon after it is collected. Some products are consumed fresh. Others become useful precisely because labour transforms them into something that can last longer. Curds can be dried. Cheese-like foods can be stored. Liquids can be carried in appropriate containers. The household turns a perishable abundance into provisions. The work has a sensory world of its own. There is the sour warmth of fermented milk, the dry texture of stored dairy products, the steam of broth, the scrape of a wooden utensil, and the careful cleaning of a vessel before it is used again. These details make the meal feel inhabited without turning it into a catalogue. Hospitality also carries social judgment. The arrival of a traveller invites kindness, but it also invites observation. Who is this person? From which direction have they come? How tired is the horse? What news travels with them? In a landscape where riders remain visible for a long time before arrival, the household has time to prepare both welcome and attention. Water remains quietly present in the meal. Animals need it. People need it. Vessels must be filled, carried, and protected. A camp near a dependable source feels different from a camp forced to calculate every trip carefully. Even when the script lingers on milk and broth, the household's relationship with water continues beneath the surface, connecting the hearth to the landscape outside. A guest may carry food for the road when leaving. The gesture is practical, but it also extends the household beyond its doorway. A piece of dried dairy food, a portion of preserved meat, or a filled container accompanies the rider into the distance. Hospitality becomes portable, much like the camp itself. As the midday pause ends, we can widen our view again and pay attention to the people whose work keeps a mobile household possible. The camp is held together by work that rarely announces itself. A rope is retied before it fails. A young animal is watched before it weakens. Felt is repaired before the next storm finds a worn edge. A container is cleaned, a garment mended, a child guided, a cart checked, milk processed, fuel gathered, and a load remembered long before anyone begins to pack. These tasks are not small because they are quiet. For a long time, popular images of the Mongol world concentrated almost entirely on mounted men. Horses, bows, riders, and campaigns dominated the frame. That focus overlooks the household systems that made mobility possible. Recent scholarship has emphasized more clearly what steppe life itself would already suggest. Women were central to the management of camps, the organization of seasonal migrations, the production and preservation of food, the care of animals and children, the maintenance of household goods, and the continuity of family life. A mounted society still needs someone to make the camp move. Imagine the midday light falling across a series of ordinary tasks. Near one dwelling, wool is handled and sorted. Felt does not appear ready-made. It begins with animals, labour, water, pressure, time, and knowledge. Elsewhere, a piece of clothing is repaired. The garment may be made from wool, felt, leather, skin, or traded textile, depending on circumstance. Its purpose is not display alone. It must work in wind and cold. it must allow movement, it must survive repeated wear. A child watches the repair. The child may not be receiving a formal lesson, but learning is taking place. The angle of a hand, the order of a knot, the decision to reinforce one place rather than another, the way an older person tests a strap after fastening it. All of this enters memory. In a mobile household, knowledge is distributed through repeated participation. People learn because the work returns. Women in pastoral communities were responsible for many forms of labour, but responsibility should not be mistaken for a narrow domestic confinement. The household itself was a centre of production, logistics, authority, and decision-making. To manage a camp was to manage resources and movement. Seasonal relocation required judgment about packing, timing, animals, carts, helpers, children, provisions, and the route ahead. The person coordinating those realities was not standing at the edge of steppe society. She was helping hold its centre. Elite Mongol women could also exercise substantial political influence. The stories of the early Mongol Empire include women whose households, marriages, kinship ties, advice, property, and personal authority mattered in high-level decisions. Holun, Temujin's mother, and Borte, his wife, belong to any careful account of his rise. Their roles cannot be reduced to decorative presence beside a famous man. The details preserved in sources are shaped by genre and perspective, but the broader point is well supported. Women in the Mongol world could be significant actors in family, household, and imperial affairs. This should not tempt us into replacing one oversimplification with another. Daily responsibilities varied by household status, age, region, and circumstance. Not every woman held political influence. Not every man spent the day riding far from camp. Children, older relatives, attendants, dependents, and guests all contributed in different ways. The camp was a social unit, not a collection of perfectly fixed roles. Still, some kinds of work deserve to be brought forward, because history has often left them in the background. A person gathers dry dung to use as fuel. Another tends a vessel of milk. Someone checks the condition of a young animal. A covering is lifted so it can dry. A bundle is opened and inventoried. The placement of objects is remembered because the household may need to move. A child is sent to carry a message across the encampment. An older relative sits near the doorway, contributing knowledge, conversation, and a watchful eye. The tasks form a network. Food processing connects animals to winter stores. Felt making connects sheep to shelter. Repair connects today's work to tomorrow's weather. Childcare connects the immediate household to its future. Hospitality connects one camp to another. Packing connects home to geography. This is why the Jur should not be imagined as a passive backdrop. It is a workshop, storeroom, kitchen, shelter, gathering place, and movable centre of memory. Its circular walls contain more than bedding and bowls. They contain a system for continuing life across changing ground. Near the cart, a person begins to inspect household goods with the next move in mind. The camp may not relocate today. The grass may still be sufficient, and water may be dependable. But no one waits until the final hour to notice what must be repaired. Wheels, harness, felt coverings, wooden framework, containers, and ropes all require attention before movement. The logic is familiar to anyone who has prepared carefully for a journey, though the scale is greater here because the household itself will travel. A leather strap is replaced. A coil of rope is sorted. A folded covering is shaken out, examined, and folded again. The repetition is soothing because it contains competence. No one needs to explain every step aloud. The work has been performed before. Hands move with practiced memory. In the wider history of the Mongol Empire, this household knowledge becomes easy to overlook because the scale changes so dramatically. Armies travel long distances, messengers cross regions, royal camps move with extensive entourages, political decisions affect enormous territories. But the underlying ability to organize movement does not emerge from nowhere. It grows from households accustomed to packing, transporting, rebuilding, feeding, and coordinating people and animals. Mobility is not only speed on horseback, it is the ability to carry a home without losing its order. It is knowing which object must remain accessible during a journey and which can be secured deeply inside a load. It is keeping children safe while animals move. It is allowing the hearth to cool at the right time. It is remembering what the next campsite will need before the first cart begins to roll. Women were central to this expertise. The afternoon light has grown warmer now. The visitor from the midday meal has returned to the open air. A horse waits nearby. Conversation continues briefly before the rider prepares to leave. Around them, the camp has never stopped working. A child brings a small bundle toward the cart and sets it down where instructed. Someone lifts it, adjusts its placement and nods. The action is ordinary. It may have happened countless times in countless camps, yet within it lies the practical inheritance of the steppe. Sooner or later, the grass changes. Sooner or later, water becomes less convenient. Weather shifts, or a seasonal route calls the household onward. Older people contribute another kind of strength. A household needs hands capable of lifting, milking, riding and packing, but it also needs memory. Someone has to remember a reliable water source from an earlier year, the route that becomes difficult after rain, the animal that responds poorly to a certain burden, the family relationship behind an approaching visitor, or the order in which a complicated load is best assembled. Children grow into responsibility by moving through this layered world. A very young child may carry a light object, gather fuel, watch animals near the dwelling, or remain close to an older relative. Later, the tasks widen. Riding, herding, mending, preparing food, and helping with migration become part of competence. Childhood is not absent from the camp, but it is woven into work. There are moments of rest too. People talk while hands continue with familiar tasks. A child may play near the edge of an activity before being called back. Someone sits in sunlight briefly after completing a repair. The household is not a machine. Its efficiency includes pauses, conversation, humour, fatigue, and the ordinary variations of family life. The labour of women also extends into the moral world of the household. Advice can be practical and political at once. A person who understands the needs of children, animals, supplies, relatives, and seasonal movement holds knowledge that matters when larger decisions are made. The authority of figures such as Hoylun and Borte becomes easier to understand when we have already spent time inside the functioning camp, rather than meeting them only as names in a genealogy. Decision-making can be quiet. It may take the form of a brief exchange beside a cart, a question asked while milk is being handled, or a reminder given before a child carries a bundle away. Not every important act announces itself as authority. In the camp, authority often appears as the ability to anticipate what others will need. When that time arrives, the camp does not vanish in confusion. It folds itself carefully into motion. A camp can begin to move long before the first cart rolls forward. The process starts with observation. Grazing has changed. Animals must travel toward better pasture. A water source may no longer be as convenient. The season is turning, or the household is following a route known through memory and experience. The decision does not need to feel sudden. It belongs to the logic that has shaped every task since morning. Imagine that the day of movement has arrived. The fire at the centre of the jar is allowed to settle. Bedding is folded. Bowls, vessels, tools, leather containers, and small personal belongings are gathered. Items needed early in the journey are separated from those that can remain secured more deeply. A child carries something light. An older person watches the sequence and notices if a step has been missed. The circular home begins to change shape. Felt coverings are loosened and folded. Roof poles are taken down with care. The central crown is lowered. Wooden lattice sections are collapsed inward. Parts that seem to form a complete shelter only moments before become transportable pieces, familiar in the hands of people who have moved them many times. There is no need to rush the description. A covering is folded once, then again. A rope is pulled through the hands and coiled. A wooden section is lifted onto a cart. A knot is tightened. The work is physical, but it is orderly. A home becomes a series of remembered parts. The household does not lose the meaning of the dwelling as it dismantles it. The jar is still present, only waiting to rise beneath a different patch of sky. Carts stand ready. Oxen may be harnessed where the terrain and household allow. Yaks can serve in suitable regions. Bactrian camels kneel to receive heavy loads. Pack animals and carts divide the weight of the household. Felt, framework, containers, provisions, rugs, bedding, tools, and furnishings all find their places. Women play a central role in organising this movement. They know which bundles matter, how goods should be distributed, what must remain near at hand, and what the family will require when the new camp is raised. The process makes visible the management that has been present all along. Mobility is not a single skill belonging only to the rider at the edge of the flock. It is a collective achievement. The animals are gathered gradually. Sheep move together in a broad, unsettled line. Goats weave among them with a different energy. Horses are brought closer, though some remain available for riders who will watch the procession from the edges. Camels stand under their loads with slow patience. Carts creak as weight settles onto wood and harness. Then the camp begins to leave. The movement is not a parade, and it is not a flight. It follows the demands of terrain. Animals may spread and gather. Riders adjust their positions. Carts seek the better ground. A river crossing, a rough slope, or a soft patch of earth changes the pace. The procession carries its own rhythm, one shaped by the slowest burden and the most vulnerable animals as much as by the riders who can move ahead. The old campsite grows quiet behind them. Flattened grass marks the places where dwellings stood. The remains of the fire are faint. A few disturbed patches of earth show where carts rested and animals gathered. The smoke is gone. Wind moves through the space again. There is something slightly lonely in the image, but not sad. The empty ground is not a ruin. It has completed its purpose for a time. Another household may pass nearby later. The grass will change. Weather will erase some traces and deepen others. The campsite returns to the larger landscape. The moving camp travels at the pace of attention. A rider looks back toward the flock. Another moves ahead to consider the route. Someone walking near a cart checks a fastening. A child rides or travels with relatives, watching the land change gradually. The sun shifts across the sky. Grass whispers against hooves and wheels. No two migrations are identical. The distance may be short or long. The weather may be generous or uncertain. The household may be moving alone, alongside related families, or within a larger group. The route may lead toward a summer pasture, a wintering area, a river valley, or ground chosen for circumstances that cannot be reduced to a fixed schedule. Region matters. Herd composition matters. Social relationships matter. To describe movement as rootlessness would miss the point. The camp is deeply connected to the land, but the connection is expressed through routes rather than a single address. Rivers, hills, sheltered valleys, grazing grounds, and remembered stopping places form a geography of belonging. A family can know a wide landscape intimately because it has encountered that landscape in different seasons and conditions. The procession reaches a new site. The decision to stop has been shaped by water, grass, shelter, and the needs of the animals. Carts slow, loads are loosened, camels kneel. The flock moves outward again, relieved of the close order required by travel. Riders remain attentive while the household begins to rebuild. The ger rises in reverse. Wooden lattice walls expand into a circle. The doorway takes its place. Roof poles lift toward the central crown. Felt coverings return over the frame. Ropes secure the outer layers. Goods are brought inside. Bedding is arranged. Bowls and containers return to use. A new hearth is prepared. Smoke rises beneath the changed horizon. The view from the doorway is not the same as it was this morning. Perhaps water glints more clearly from here. Perhaps a ridge provides shelter from wind. Perhaps the grass stands higher. The household recognizes difference without losing familiarity. The jia creates continuity within movement. Children absorb this sequence as naturally as they absorb the care of animals. They learn that a home has parts. They learn the order in which those parts should be handled. They learn what can be carried, what must be tied, and what must not be forgotten. They learn that arriving is another form of work. The first quiet after a move is earned through coordination. As the afternoon lowers toward evening, the new camp begins to settle. Animals feed. The hearth takes hold. The circular dwelling gathers people again. The old campsite lies somewhere behind them, already returning to grass and wind. This repeated act of leaving and rebuilding shaped the world into which Temujin was born. During the journey, the household carries a moving soundscape. Carts creak. Animals call. Hooves strike harder earth and then soften over grass. Harness shifts under weight. A rider speaks briefly to another rider, and the words are carried away by wind. The procession can stretch across the land so that its beginning and end experience the same route at different moments. Crossing water changes the pace. Animals approach cautiously or eagerly depending on depth, current, and familiarity. Carts need a workable passage. Bundles must remain secure. People judge the bank before committing the heavier loads. The scene need not be difficult to feel meaningful. Even an ordinary crossing reveals the combined importance of terrain, animals, and coordination. Arrival has its own order. Before comfort returns, someone must decide where the doorway will face, where carts can stand, where animals should be guided, and how the fire can be started safely. The first rising smoke is a small announcement. The household has become a camp again. By night, the new location may already begin to feel familiar. A child recognizes the position of bedding. A bowl returns to its usual place. The wind makes a different sound across the veldt, but the interior circle remains known. The first evening after a move has its own stillness. People are tired in an ordinary way. Animals have fed and settled. The new hearth gives off a smell that is familiar even though the ground beneath it is new. Outside, someone listens to the wind and judges whether the site feels as sheltered as expected. Inside, the household rests within a circle rebuilt from memory. The rhythm of dismantling and rebuilding also influences how people imagine loss and return. A dwelling taken apart is not destroyed. An empty campsite is not abandoned forever in the emotional sense. The household has learned that disappearance can be temporary and that order can be recreated through knowledge carried in people. His life would eventually become connected to movement on an extraordinary scale. But before there were large gatherings, envoys, guards, and distant campaigns, there was a child who knew what it meant for a household to depend on animals, kinship, memory, and the ability to raise a home again after the road. To enter Temujin's childhood, it helps to keep the newly raised gyr in view. The wooden frame has risen again. Felt covers the walls. The fire is beginning to warm the interior. Outside, animals settle into new grazing. A child watches older relatives place household objects where they belong. The view beyond the doorway has changed, but the habits of home have returned. Temujin grew up in a world shaped by this kind of movement. The exact year of his birth is uncertain. Several dates appear in the historical tradition, and modern accounts often use about 1162. He was born into the Borjigin lineage in the region of northern Mongolia, associated with the Onon River and the wider landscape around it. His father was Yesugei, a man with standing among the Mongols. His mother was Hoelun, whose strength and importance become especially visible in the stories of the family's difficult years. The Secret History of the Mongols is our most important narrative guide to Temujin's early life. It is a remarkable text, rich in dialogue, memory, family tradition, and poetic compression. It brings people close enough that their voices seem almost audible across the centuries. But it is not a diary. Its episodes often carry the shape of remembered stories. Some details may preserve strong historical traditions. Others may have been sharpened through retelling. A calm account should value the source without treating every scene as though it had been filmed from the doorway of a gyr. According to that tradition, Temujin's early world changed sharply after the death of his father. The family lost much of its support. Hoelun and her children faced reduced circumstances, no longer protected by the network of loyalty on which they had expected to rely. The Secret History describes a lean life in which the family gathered what the land and water could provide, including roots and fish. The contrast matters because it shows how fragile status could become when relationships failed. A household might possess lineage and memory, yet still need to struggle through the practical demands of each day. There is no need to linger on hardship in a grim way. Imagine instead the quiet persistence of a family maintaining itself. A small fire still has to be built. Food still has to be found and shared. Clothing still has to be mended. Children still grow. Weather continues to move over the grassland, whether a household is secure or isolated. The work of daily life becomes more exact when resources narrow, but the work remains recognizable. Hoelun stands near the center of this picture. The sources remember her as a person of endurance and authority. She held the family together through a vulnerable period, and her role reminds us again that the history of Temujin cannot be understood only through mounted companions and later institutions. Before a political household expanded, there was a smaller household protected by labour, judgment, and determination. A young person raised in such conditions would learn that kinship matters, but also that kinship can fail. This is one possible thread connecting Temujin's early experiences to the kind of leader he later became. It should be presented as interpretation, not as a simple formula. No childhood event explains an entire adult life. Still, it is reasonable to notice that Temujin placed unusual weight on dependable followers and personal loyalty. His rise involved more than inherited rank. He gathered companions and supporters through relationships that could cross older divisions. The steppe world into which he was born was politically fragmented. Groups competed, allied, separated, and regrouped. A promise could matter deeply. A marriage connected households. A shared journey or act of assistance could become part of a lasting relationship. The distinction between family, follower, ally, and rival did not remain static. Political life moved through personal ties as well as larger identities. This is why the stories surrounding Temujin often return to moments of recognition. The secret history tells of Bo-Orshu, a young man who helped Temujin recover stolen horses and became one of his companions. We have already passed lightly through that story when standing among the horse lines. Its lasting importance does not depend on whether every detail unfolded exactly as told. The episode expresses an idea central to Temujin's remembered rise. Loyalty might appear through action, and a trusted companion might emerge from beyond the immediate circle of inherited kin. Another important figure was Jamuka, Temujin's early companion and Anda, or sworn brother. Their relationship later became a rivalry. It would be easy to turn the story into a dramatic tale of friendship and betrayal, but the calmer truth is that steppe politics could rearrange human relationships under pressure. Leaders attracted followers. Coalitions formed around different possibilities. People had to decide where security, opportunity, and loyalty might lie. The distance between two camps could become political as well as geographical. Togril, the Keret ruler often known in other sources as Kahn, also belonged to Temujin's network of relationships. Temujin's father had been connected to him, and Temujin later sought his support. Alliances such as these mattered because no household existed entirely by itself. A person might be surrounded by grassland and still live within a dense web of obligations. Borte, Temujin's wife, belongs near the centre of the story as well. Their marriage joined households and became important to Temujin's adult life. Borte would later be remembered as an influential figure within the family and the developing political world around him. Some episodes connected to her early marriage are traumatic and do not need detailed retelling in a sleep narration. It is enough to acknowledge that instability touched Temujin's household directly, and that alliances helped restore the family circle. Borte's presence should not be reduced to a plot point. She was a major figure in the household that grew around Temujin. As time passes, the child in our imagined camp becomes a young man moving through a wider social landscape. Perhaps he rides along a river valley, seeing the smoke of another encampment in the distance. Perhaps he enters a ger where conversation pauses for a moment as a newcomer sits beside the hearth. Perhaps he listens while older people discuss kinship, obligations, grazing, and news. Political understanding would not arrive as a theory written on paper. It would grow through meals, journeys, losses, promises, and the careful observation of how people behaved when circumstances changed. The steppe teaches attention in more than one way. A herder reads grass and weather. A rider reads the condition of a horse. A household manager reads supplies and timing. A young leader learns to read people, who keeps a promise, who hesitates, who can be trusted with responsibility, and who gathers others around them. Temujin's rise was not smooth or inevitable. Later generations, knowing the scale of what followed, can easily imagine destiny glowing around every early episode. The secret history itself sometimes frames events through signs, dreams, and the favour of heaven. Those elements matter because they reveal how Temujin's authority was remembered and explained. But from the ground, the path would have been uncertain. A young man gathering followers could not see the completed map of a future empire. He could only respond to the world immediately around him. That world remained pastoral. Even as alliances grew, animals still needed grazing. A household still needed food. Riders still depended on remounts. Guests still entered felt-covered dwellings. A leader's authority had to travel with people who lived in camps capable of moving across the landscape. Gradually, Temujin attracted companions, allies, and households. The circle around him widened. Some people followed because of personal loyalty. Some may have seen opportunity or protection. Some joined through political arrangements. Some relationships were reinforced by marriage and kinship. Others grew through service. The old landscape of groups and rival leaders did not disappear in a single moment, but the balance was changing. Imagine the effect on the camp. There are more horses at the edge of the grass. More visitors approach from a distance. More voices gather near the hearth. A person arrives carrying a message. Another brings news from a neighbouring group. Goods need to be received and distributed. Responsibilities must be assigned. Trusted people stand closer to the centre of the household. The jar remains circular. The fire remains low, but the world around it has become more complex. The early stories also remind us how important animals remained even in moments of political change. The loss of horses was not a minor inconvenience. It threatened movement, food security, status, and the ability to maintain relationships across distance. Recovering horses could therefore reveal character in a way that later readers might miss if they see only property. The episode of Ordu is memorable because a practical crisis becomes the beginning of trust. Temujin's world also required careful listening. A leader did not gather followers by speaking into an empty landscape. People evaluated one another. They weighed family history, generosity, courage, reliability, opportunity, and the strength of existing alliances. Some joined Temujin early, others opposed him, others shifted position as the political balance changed. The process was human, uncertain, and gradual. It is worth pausing over Holon and Borte once more, not to repeat their biographies, but to notice how households carried political meaning. A mother who preserved a family through hardship, and a wife whose counsel mattered were not separate from the story of authority. The Jur could be a place where the future direction of an alliance was discussed in low voices, while ordinary tasks continued nearby. By the time followers increasingly gathered around Temujin, the campfire had become more than a family centre. It was a point toward which obligations, expectations, and hopes moved across the grassland. The secret history sometimes places vivid speech into the mouths of people long gone. These passages are among the reasons the text feels so alive. They should be heard as part of a remembered narrative tradition, not quoted as though a scribe stood beside every conversation. That caution does not make the stories less valuable. It helps us listen for what they preserve: the importance of kinship, hunger, horses, loyalty, advice, and the instability of a fragmented political world. Temujin's later success should not make his early vulnerability seem theatrical. Many families on the steppe understood uncertainty in their own ways. The difference is that Temujin's household became the centre of a political transformation remembered across Eurasia. The ordinary and the extraordinary remain intertwined. The family camp is beginning to expand towards something larger, an ordu, a mobile household in which personal life, political authority, labour, hospitality, and administration meet beneath the open sky. A larger encampment reveals itself gradually. At first, there are only riders on the horizon. Because the land is open, people in the camp see them early. Someone pauses near a cart and looks outward. A child notices the direction of the adult's attention. A dog becomes alert. The shapes remain small for a while, moving at a measured pace across the grass. As they approach, details separate from distance. There are several horses. One rider carries something bundled carefully. Another leads a spare animal. The visitors are expected, or at least not entirely surprising. A person from the encampment walks forward to meet them before they reach the central dwellings. Greetings are exchanged. Horses are taken or guided toward a place where they can rest and feed. The new arrivals are offered hospitality before conversation becomes formal. The scene belongs to an ordu. The term can be translated in different ways depending on context, but here it is useful to think of an elite or royal mobile encampment and household. The word later travelled into other languages and lies behind the English word horde, although the later associations of that English word can be misleading. An ordu was not simply a disorderly mass of people. It was an organised centre of authority that could move. This is not a palace transplanted awkwardly onto grass. Its mobility is part of its meaning. The ruler's household remains connected to the rhythms we have already followed: animals, carts, felt dwellings, food, weather, visitors, and movement. But the scale expands. More people depend on the decisions made near the centre. More goods arrive. More messages must be heard, interpreted, and remembered. Trusted retainers manage access and responsibility. Guards maintain order. Craftspeople repair necessary objects. Interpreters and scribes become increasingly important as relationships reach beyond a single linguistic or cultural circle. The encampment contains layers. Near the outer edge, animals graze and carts rest under their loads. Farther in, household activity continues around gers and fires. Visitors are received. Goods are sorted. Somewhere a saddle is being repaired. Somewhere else, food is being prepared for people who have travelled through the day. Riders come and go. The centre of authority is not marked only by grandeur, it is marked by attention. A person must know who has arrived. A message must reach the right listener. A horse must be cared for. A guest must be seated. A request must be remembered. Temujin's growing household depended on trusted companions. Some had been attached to him for years. Some belonged to families with their own standing. Others entered his service through the changing political world of the steppe. Loyalty had to become organised, especially after 1206, when the new polity required more than informal relationships. The keshig, often described as an imperial guard and household institution, stood close to the centre of Chinggis Khan's administration. A guard protects, but the role can be broader than standing watch. In Mongol imperial institutions, service within the royal household could connect people to administration, command, and political trust. The keshig became a place where personal loyalty and governance met. Its members belonged to the ruler's immediate environment and could later carry responsibility outward. For a sleep narration, there is no need to turn this into a list of offices. It is enough to feel the change in atmosphere. At the ordinary camp, a visitor brings news from nearby. At the growing ordu, arrivals may come from farther away and carry matters affecting many households. At the ordinary camp, a rope is repaired because a cart may move soon. At the ordu, dozens or hundreds of similar acts of preparation support a mobile political centre. At the ordinary camp, hospitality binds neighbours. At the ordu, the same gesture can begin a diplomatic conversation. The world remains tactile. A bundled textile is unwrapped. A metal object catches the late afternoon light. A leather document case is handled carefully. A scribe sits where the light is sufficient. A visitor removes dust from clothing after a long ride. The Mongol polity did not develop in isolation from neighbouring peoples. As Temujin expanded his authority, he incorporated knowledge, skills, and personnel from beyond the pastoral world. Yuga literacy and bureaucratic experience would become especially important. Merchants, artisans, interpreters, and specialists could all find places within a widening network of Mongol power. This does not mean that the early ordu became a settled court in disguise. The balance is more interesting than that. A mobile centre could absorb techniques associated with writing and administration while remaining adapted to the steppe. Political authority did not require stone walls before it could become effective. Decisions could be made in felt-covered dwellings. Messages could leave on horseback. Goods could travel on carts and camels. A court could move with the seasons and still project influence across long distances. The absence of a permanent monumental capital in Temujin's early story should not be mistaken for an absence of organisation. Karakorum, the famous Mongol capital, belongs more strongly to the reign of Ogodei, Chinggis Khan's son and successor. It should not dominate the atmosphere of this earlier period. For Temujin and the first stage of imperial formation, the mobile household remains the more revealing image. Imagine the late afternoon around the ordu. A guard changes place with another guard. There's no loud announcement. One person simply takes responsibility as another steps away. A horse drinks. A messenger eats before beginning the next part of a journey. Someone inside a ger listens to a report. A craftsperson works patiently at a piece of equipment. A woman responsible for part of the household confers with an attendant about supplies and timing. Authority is distributed through many quiet acts. A ruler may sit near the centre of the encampment, but the encampment functions because knowledge moves through it. Someone knows which family has arrived. Someone understands the condition of the remounts. Someone recognizes a visitor's language. Someone records or remembers a decision. Someone makes sure that food reaches the people who need it. Someone watches the weather. This is also where household and state remain intertwined. In a modern administrative building, work may be divided into offices with doors and signs. In a mobile court, the boundaries are less architectural. Personal service, guard duty, political loyalty, domestic management, and logistical preparation overlap. A visitor can move from a horse line to a bowl of arag, from hospitality to conversation, from conversation to obligation. The growing complexity does not erase the original rhythms of camp life, it magnifies them. More felt coverings respond to the wind. More fires produce thin strands of smoke. More animals darken the grass around the encampment. More riders shrink toward the horizon as they depart. The larger ordu can also create a sense of distance within closeness. Many people are nearby, but not everyone stands at the centre. Some wait, some serve, some observe, some carry information outward. Authority has a geography, even when its structures can be folded and loaded onto carts. As evening approaches, another group of riders appears. Their arrival is noticed long before their words can be heard. The encampment prepares to receive them. A horse is led aside. A vessel is brought forward. The visitors dismount and enter the rhythm of the household. The news they carry belongs to a world that is rapidly widening. Across the steppe, rival coalitions have weakened. Followers have gathered. Older divisions have been disrupted and reorganized. Temujin is no longer simply the head of a vulnerable family or one leader among many competing possibilities. Soon, a much larger gathering will take place near the Onon River. Families, leaders, retainers, and animals will converge on the grassland. The growing ordu also depends on timing. A mobile political household cannot receive everyone in the same way at the same moment. Some visitors are known in advance, others arrive with less warning. Some carry gifts, requests, or news. Some are attached to allied families. Some bring specialized skills. The people responsible for receiving them need to balance hospitality with order. Gift-giving belongs naturally in this setting. A textile, a fur, a useful metal object, an animal, or another portable item can carry more than material value. It may mark respect, reinforce a relationship, acknowledge service, or open a conversation. Goods suited to movement are especially meaningful because they can travel with the household and be redistributed when the Kahn rewards followers. Redistribution is one of the ways authority becomes visible. Animals, goods, responsibilities, and honours do not remain at the centre. They move outward. A loyal companion receives recognition. A household receives a new obligation. A visitor returns to another group carrying both news and the memory of how they were treated. The ordu radiates relationships rather than merely collecting people. Interpreters become increasingly valuable as the world expands. A visitor may speak a language not understood by everyone near the hearth. A merchant may know routes unfamiliar to the riders who receive him. A captured or recruited specialist may bring knowledge from a settled region. The mobile court grows not by abandoning steppe practice, but by adding layers of expertise to it. There is a practical humility in this adaptability. A useful skill is noticed. A capable person is given a place. A system that works elsewhere may be adopted and reshaped. The early Mongol polity drew strength not only from discipline and mobility, but from the ability to learn. As darkness approaches, the ordu resembles a constellation on the grass. Fires appear at different distances. Some belong to families. Some mark places where guards remain alert. Some warm travellers who have not yet settled. This centre is not defined by a single monumental building. It is defined by the routes along which people, goods, and information move toward it and away from it. Multiple households could cluster around the Khan's wider family, and elite women might oversee significant households of their own. The political centre was therefore not a single tent surrounded by anonymous followers. It was a mobile constellation of related centres, each with people, animals, goods, and responsibilities. Authority moved through family structures as well as formal service. The ordu can therefore be understood as a moving archive of relationships. People remember earlier service. Gifts recall alliances. Guards recognize faces. Scribes preserve decisions. Household managers know where supplies belong. The centre travels, but it carries its history with it. And beside the river that has quietly threaded through Temujin's story, a new title will be spoken. The gathering does not appear in a single moment. It grows across the landscape. A group of riders arrives first, then another. Carts move slowly over the grass. Animals spread around the edges of the encampments. Felt-covered dwellings rise in increasing numbers. thin lines of smoke become visible against the sky. People who have travelled from different directions exchange greetings, news, and careful observations. The river continues beside them. The Onon is not a stage built for ceremony, it belongs to the land. Water moves past banks shaped by season and weather. Birds lift from low ground. Horses lower their heads to drink. The sound of the gathering never fully overwhelms the sound of wind and flowing water. In 1206, after years of conflict, alliance, separation and consolidation, Temujin was proclaimed Chinggis Khan at a great assembly, commonly connected with the Onon River. The assembly is often described with the term Kuriltai, or Kurultai in another common spelling. In the Mongol political world, such gatherings were associated with major decisions, legitimacy, leadership, and the participation of important figures. We should not imagine a modern election, and we should not imagine a purely decorative ritual. The gathering belonged to steppe political traditions and to the realities of power that had developed around Temujin. The title Chinggis Khan is famous, but its exact meaning remains debated. Many accounts translate it as universal ruler. Others emphasize the possibility of an oceanic or broad-reaching sense. The uncertainty is worth preserving. A historical title can carry echoes that do not fit perfectly into one English phrase. What matters for our quiet journey is the transition. Temujin, the child of a vulnerable household, and the leader who had gathered followers across the steppe, now received a name tied to a new political order. The gathering can be imagined without spectacle. A banner moves in the wind, a horse stamps at the ground, someone adjusts a covering on a cart. People stand in groups talking softly. A child looks toward a line of unfamiliar animals. Smoke passes across the scene and thins above the river. The grass holds more people than an ordinary camp could hold, but the fundamental elements remain familiar. Felt dwellings, animals, fires, food, ropes, saddles, visitors, news. The new polity is born within a landscape that still requires grazing and water. Historical accounts often treat 1206 as the founding moment of the Mongol Empire or the Great Mongol State. The phrase founding moment is useful as long as we do not mistake it for an instant in which every institution appeared fully formed. Political systems grow through earlier practices and later adjustments. The assembly recognized a transformation that had already been developing. It also opened the way for further reorganization. Followers and households were arranged in new ways. The decimal organization associated with Mongol forces divided people into groupings that could be described in units of 10, 100, 1,000, and larger formations. The exact development and application of these structures deserves more detail than a sleep narration requires, but the broad idea matters. Temujin's authority did not rest only on personal charisma. It became connected to systems of responsibility designed to weaken older fragmentation and strengthen loyalty to the new order. The household institutions around the Kahn also became more important. Trusted guards and retainers stood close to the centre. Service within the Keshig linked personal loyalty with administration. Companions who had shared earlier years now belonged to a political world with wider obligations. Decisions made near the river would travel outward through people accustomed to riding, remembering routes and carrying messages. There is a gentle irony in the setting. A political change of enormous consequence unfolds without stone architecture. There is no marble hall, no permanent avenue leads to the assembly, no carved doorway must remain standing after the people leave. The authority created here can travel. The dwelling at the centre can be dismantled. The hearth can cool. The carts can be loaded. The grass can rise again where the gathering once stood. This mobility is not a weakness. It is one of the keys to understanding the early Mongol world. The people around the Onon know how to build order without fixing it permanently to one place. They know how to carry households over distance. They know how to depend on animals without exhausting nearby grazing. They know how to watch the horizon for arrivals. They know how to receive visitors, distribute food, assign responsibility, and prepare for another journey. The gathering intensifies those habits. There are more horses to manage. More food must be prepared. More information moves between groups. More relationships are clarified. More people listen when a title is spoken. For many listeners, the name Genghis Khan arrives already surrounded by later events. It is difficult to hear it without imagining maps expanding across Asia and beyond. Yet at the moment of proclamation, the future remains unwritten. The gathering does not know every road that riders will follow. It does not know how later generations will remember the name. It does not know which stories will become legend and which ordinary tasks will disappear from view. The people present know the river, the grass, the horses, and the political reality immediately before them. They know that an old pattern has changed. Temujin has become Chinggis Khan. The transition is personal, but it is also collective. A new Mongol political community has taken shape under his leadership. Older loyalties have been rearranged. Some groups have been absorbed, dispersed, or subordinated through processes that included coercion and conflict. A balanced history cannot pretend the unification was gentle. But a sleep narration does not need to reproduce its harshest episodes in sensory detail. It is enough to acknowledge that the calm assembly rests on years of struggle, and then to return to what the gathering means for the world around the camp. Toward evening, the light softens along the river. The formal moment has passed, but the encampments remain active. People speak in lower voices. Meals are prepared. Horses graze. A cartwheel is checked for the journey ahead. A child grows tired and is guided toward a felt-covered dwelling. A visitor sits near a fire, repeating part of what has been heard. The new title travels first through conversation, then it travels by rider. Imagine a messenger preparing to leave the gathering. The horse is ready. A second animal may be available farther along the route or carried as a remount depending on the journey. The rider receives instructions, food, or a document. There may be names to remember and places to reach. The task belongs naturally to a world already shaped by mobility. The messenger turns away from the Onon. For a while the gathering remains visible behind him. Smoke, dwellings, animals and people spread along the river. Then the land rises gently. The view begins to narrow. The rider becomes smaller against the open country. News is leaving the camp. The assembly also brings together many kinds of expectation. Some participants have followed Temujin through earlier uncertainty. Some belong to households newly incorporated into his authority. Some understand the proclamation through loyalty, some through necessity, and some through hope for a more stable order after long rivalry. A gathering can create unity without making every person's experience identical. The riverbank is therefore both ordinary and consequential. People still need to tether horses, prepare food, find space for dwellings, and watch children. Yet conversations carry a different weight. Names are spoken carefully. Relationships are clarified. Trusted companions stand nearer to the centre. The political community becomes visible in the placement of people and the obligations they accept. Later, historians look backward and recognise a threshold. The year 1206 offers a convenient point from which to describe the beginning of an empire. The people standing beside the Onon may have understood the moment through a more immediate frame. Temujin's supremacy across the steppe, the recognition of his title, the reordering of followers, and the expectation that decisions would now travel farther. This is how scale grows without losing contact with the ground. A title is spoken, a household listens, a rider remembers, an instruction is carried outward. The river continues to move beside them. When the gathering eventually disperses, the landscape does not keep a monument. It keeps traces. Grass lies pressed where animals stood. Ash cools where fires burned. Paths remain visible for a time between places where dwellings had risen. The absence of stone makes the event no less real. It simply leaves memory, narrative, and institutions to carry the meaning onward. The proclamation does not silence ordinary conversation. After the formal moment, people still discuss animals, routes, relatives, and the practical details of departure. This coexistence is worth preserving. Great historical change often rests beside familiar concerns rather than replacing them. The story is moving outward, onto roads that are not paved, and routes that do not belong to one single line on a map. The rider leaving the Onon does not follow a paved road. There is no stone milestone at every turn, no continuous track cut neatly across the grassland, and no single route that remains unchanged in every season. The path is known through landscape and memory. A river bend, a low ridge, a sheltered hollow, a familiar encampment, and the condition of the ground all help guide the journey. The horse moves steadily. Behind the rider, the large gathering near the river becomes smaller. Smoke rises from the clustered dwellings. Animals spread around the edges. Then a slope intervenes, and the assembly is no longer visible. The messenger carries the news onward through a country where information has always travelled with people and animals. Mounted communication is a natural extension of steppe mobility. A rider accustomed to long distances knows when a horse needs rest, where water may be found, and how to recognize a likely stopping place. Remounts make a journey more flexible. Familiar households and trusted contacts create points of connection across the land. A message can move from one camp to another without requiring a permanent road in the settled sense. As the Mongol polity grew, these habits became part of a larger communication system. The imperial relay network is often known by terms such as jam or yam. Evidence indicates that a postal system began developing under Chinggis Khan, and it became one of the important institutions of the expanding empire. Under later rulers, it was extended, organized, and refined across enormous distances. It is best not to imagine the mature network appearing complete in a single afternoon in 1206. Institutions grow. Stations, remounts, obligations, and routes become more regular over time. Still, the seed of the system makes sense in this landscape. A rider travels to a known place. A fresh horse may be available. A message continues. Distance is divided into manageable stages. The road without pavement becomes a chain of human and animal responsibilities. Imagine the messenger arriving at a smaller camp as evening begins to soften the sky. The rider is seen before reaching the dwellings. Someone steps forward. The horse's condition is noticed immediately. A bowl is offered. The message is delivered or passed onward. Perhaps the rider rests briefly. Perhaps another person prepares to continue. The larger world enters through small gestures. A saddle is lifted. A document changes hands. A horse drinks. A person listens carefully. The Mongol world was not isolated from settled societies before the empire expanded. Pastoral communities exchanged goods with towns, agricultural regions, and neighbouring peoples. They valued grain, textiles, metalwork, and crafted objects that could not be produced easily within every mobile household. Settled societies in turn sought animals and other products from the steppe. Trade, tribute, taxation, gift-giving, and raiding could exist uncomfortably close to one another. Cooperation and tension were not opposites. They often belonged to the same frontier relationship. A merchant moving toward an ordu might carry cloth carefully protected from dust and weather. Another traveller might bring metal goods, tools, or vessels. Grain could arrive from cultivated regions. Craftspeople brought skills as well as objects. The movement of goods created a quieter form of connection beneath the larger political story. The phrase Silk Roads is useful if we remember the plural. There was no single road running like a line drawn across an empty map. Routes overlapped, separated and shifted. Some followed river valleys. Some crossed steppe corridors. Some passed through towns and caravan centres. Goods rarely travelled from one end of Eurasia to the other in the hands of one merchant. They moved through stages, exchanges, partnerships, and changing political conditions. The steppe camp was one node within that wider movement. A felt-covered dwelling might contain a textile whose material or design came from far away. A saddle fitting might reflect specialised metalwork. A vessel might have passed through trade. A visitor might speak another language. An interpreter might become essential. A ruler accustomed to mobile households could still recognise the value of merchants, artisans, and people who understood distant places. Writing became increasingly important as the political world widened. According to a commonly cited educational summary from Columbia University's Asia for Educators, Temujin assigned a Uyghur retainer in 1204, before the proclamation of 1206, to adapt the Uyghur script for writing Mongolian. The broader historical point is clear even when details are discussed carefully. Uyghur literacy and administrative experience contributed significantly to Mongol governance. This change deserves a quiet scene. Imagine a scribe seated where the late light remains sufficient. A document rests before him. The writing is vertical, shaped by a script adapted for the Mongolian language. The material may be modest. The setting may still be a mobile encampment. Outside, horses graze and carts stand ready. Inside, speech has begun to acquire another form of endurance. A spoken instruction can travel through memory. A written instruction can travel in a case. A name can be recorded. An obligation can be clarified. A decision can reach beyond the people who first heard it. Writing does not replace oral skill. It joins it. The Mongol world continued to depend deeply on messengers, memory, personal trust and interpretation. But literacy adds another tool to a political community growing across distance. The rider carries more than words. Perhaps a document is secured inside clothing or a container. Perhaps the message remains oral because the route and task do not require writing. Either way, the journey connects felt dwellings to a larger network. A mobile court can issue instructions without ceasing to be mobile. A camp can become an administrative centre without surrounding itself with stone. Merchants and artisans also connect to the ordu through relationships of value and protection. Later, Mongol rulers became known for encouraging long-distance exchange across much of Eurasia and for drawing specialists from different regions into imperial service. The scale of this movement expanded far beyond the early encampment we have imagined. Still, The foundations are visible already. Respect for useful skill, interest in trade, the practical need for crafted goods, and the ability to incorporate people from different backgrounds. The world around Chinggis Khan widens in layers. First, there is the household, then the related camp, then the ordu, then the assembly beside the onon, then the rider disappearing toward another valley, then another rider beyond that one. The network does not remove the feeling of open country. In some ways, it intensifies it. Each messenger crossing the horizon reminds us how much land lies between one centre of conversation and another. The rider reaches a low rise as the sun begins to descend. For a moment, the horse and rider are outlined against a sky turning softer in colour. The messenger pauses, perhaps to look toward a distant line of smoke or to judge the ground ahead. Then the horse moves forward again. Somewhere beyond the next stretch of grass, another camp will receive the news. Somewhere farther away, a merchant checks a bundle of cloth. Somewhere near a hearth, a scribe folds a document. Somewhere on a route that will become more organised with time, a fresh horse waits. The Mongol camp is not an isolated island in a sea of grass. It is a moving point of connection. A relay network requires resources as well as speed. Fresh horses have to be maintained. Stations or stopping places need people, animals, supplies, and rules. Travellers using the system need authorization or recognition. Local communities may bear obligations connected to its upkeep. The mature jam was therefore not merely a chain of convenient inns. It was infrastructure, a way of converting imperial authority into dependable movement. That distinction matters because the romance of the rider can hide the labour beneath the journey. Every fresh horse has been fed, watched, and managed by someone. Every stopping place has to anticipate arrivals. Every message depends on people who may never see the court from which it originated. The network extends the household principle across a much wider territory. Care, preparation, and responsibility make mobility possible. Writing extends memory in a different way. The Yiga-derived script did not turn the Mongol world instantly into a bureaucracy of paper. Oral communication, personal trust, seals, messengers, multilingual intermediaries, and later documentary practices all interacted over time. But the adoption of writing created a durable bridge between speech and administration. A document can cross weather and distance inside a protective case. It can be read by someone who was not present when a decision was made. It can help standardize an instruction, record a name, or confirm authority. The scribe seated near the felt wall is doing something quiet and far-reaching. The movement of artisans deserves a moment too. Metalworkers, textile workers, carpenters, and other specialists could contribute directly to a mobile court and later to a much larger imperial economy. Their skills travelled with people. A crafted object was not only a luxury, a secure fitting, a repaired cart, a strong saddle component, a usable vessel, or a carefully made textile could matter in daily life. Trade routes are therefore also routes of technique. An object carries evidence of how it was made. A craftsperson carries knowledge that can be taught. An interpreter carries concepts between languages. A merchant carries information as surely as a messenger does, though the pace and purpose differ. The rider, fading into evening, joins all of these movements. Behind him lies the assembly. Ahead lies another household, another stopping place, another conversation. The line between local and imperial is made from repeated journeys. Some routes lead towards settled towns, but others remain within the pastoral world, connecting encampment to encampment. A network can be vast without becoming uniform. The same rider may pass through open grassland, river country, drier ground, and the outskirts of cultivated regions. Each transition asks for different knowledge. The empire's later communications worked because local landscapes were understood rather than erased. The rider's route may be familiar enough to feel almost domestic. A particular hollow offers shelter. A certain crossing is reliable at this season. A household at a known stopping place has received travellers before. Imperial communication grows from local knowledge repeated across many landscapes. But the light is fading now. The rider becomes smaller. The landscape grows quieter. We can allow the messenger to continue onward and return to the camp, where evening has begun to settle over felt walls, animals, and the low glow of fire. After sunset, the steppe changes scale again. The distances that seemed open and readable during the day begin to soften. Ridges lose their sharp edges. The grass turns dark. Felt-covered dwellings become rounded shadows with faint light at their doorways or roof openings. Watch fires stand apart from one another, each holding a small circle of warmth against the night. The animals settle gradually. Horses shift and breathe in the dark. Sheep draw closer together. A dog listens beyond the edge of the encampment. Leather gives a slight creak when a tether moves. From inside a ger comes the low sound of conversation, then silence, then the careful placement of a vessel near the fire. The sky becomes the largest presence. To speak about belief in the early Mongol world requires restraint. Religious life was not a single fixed system practiced identically by every household. The words used by modern scholars can simplify as much as they clarify. Sources speak of heaven, of spiritual authority, of ritual specialists often described as shamans, and of a landscape in which mountains, rivers, weather and sky carried meaning. Later Mongol imperial ideology connected rule with the favour or mandate of heaven. It is easy to make this sound more mysterious than it needs to be. Stand outside in the imagined night. The sky is not a decorative ceiling. It is enormous, immediate, and changeable. Weather arrives from it. Light returns through it. Stars cross it. A person travelling far from camp relies on it. A household watching for a change of season cannot treat it as irrelevant. Reverence for heaven grows within a landscape where the sky is not hidden behind buildings. The Mongolian term often discussed in this context is tengri, associated with heaven or the sky. The exact language of belief, ritual, and political legitimacy changed across communities and generations. We should not invent a ceremony beside our campfire or assume that every person described the sacred in precisely the same way. It is enough to understand that heaven mattered, and that political authority could be interpreted through a relationship with a larger cosmic order. Ritual specialists also had a place in the Mongol world. They are often called shamans in English language accounts. Their roles could include mediation, advice, healing, divination, ritual, and the interpretation of signs, though practices should not be flattened into one theatrical image. There is no need for drums echoing dramatically across the night, or for a scene designed to feel supernatural. Quiet belief is more plausible and more respectful. A person steps outside the ger. The firelight remains behind them. Their eyes adjust slowly. Above, the stars appear sharper than they would within a brightly lit town. The river, if one lies nearby, is heard more easily than seen. A ridge becomes a darker line beneath the sky. The landscape has memory. The Onon River carries associations with Temujin's early life, and the gathering of 1206. Mountains, waters, and roots belong to stories and obligations. A campsite may be temporary in its physical traces, but the land through which households move is not anonymous. It holds places of return, places of gathering, places connected to family, and places interpreted through belief. Chinggis Khan's expanding polity would later encounter many religious traditions across Eurasia. Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, Taoists, and others lived within Mongol-ruled territories. Mongol rulers became known in many contexts for policies that allowed varied religious communities to continue their practices, often for practical and political reasons as well as personal interest. That wider story lies beyond the camp we are visiting tonight. Yet it is worth noticing that an open sky does not require a narrow imagination. The empire that grew from the steppe would become a meeting place for many forms of belief. For now, the camp is still. A guard or watchman remains awake for a while. Not everyone sleeps at once. Animals require attention. A fire may need tending. A distant sound may need interpretation. The watch is not a scene of tension. It is another form of care. The person on watch looks toward the darker grass. A horse moves, the dog relaxes, wind touches the felt coverings and passes onward. Temujin, and later Chinggis Khan, was shaped by nights like this in the broadest sense. Not one specific night preserved in detail, but a lifetime within a landscape where distance, weather, animals, kinship, and heaven were never abstract ideas. They surrounded the household. They influenced decisions. They entered language and memory. The famous name becomes quieter when placed beneath the stars. It belongs not only to a ruler in later chronicles, but to a person who knew the sound of a horse in darkness and the way a low fire changes when someone opens the doorway. It belongs to someone formed within a moving world. The conversations inside the dwellings fade. The watchfire lowers slightly. The sky remains open and patient. Night also changes the experience of sound. During the day, the eye travels first, toward the flock, the carts, the rider, the ridge, or the smoke of another camp. In darkness, the ear becomes more important. A familiar horse can be recognized by movement. The difference between wind and footsteps matters. A dog may hear something long before a person does. The watch is an exercise in calm attention. The open sky invites humility. A household can be highly skilled and still live beneath forces larger than itself. Weather, season, distance, birth, illness, and the condition of animals are never entirely controlled. Reverence for heaven belongs comfortably within that awareness. It need not be reduced to a philosophical system spoken the same way by everyone. It can remain a posture toward a world that exceeds the household while also sustaining it. Political legitimacy adds another layer. The remembered stories of Temujin's rise sometimes present heaven and earth as favouring his authority. Such language helps explain how followers understood or justified a new order. It connects leadership to something beyond personal ambition. A careful narrator does not need to decide exactly how each listener at the time interpreted those claims. The important point is that cosmic meaning and political life were not kept in separate rooms. The night sky above the ordu is therefore both ordinary and symbolic. It is the same sky above sheep, carts, sleeping children, guarded horses, and cooling vessels. It is also the sky beneath which a new political community imagined its place in the world. The watchman does not need to explain the stars. They are enough as presents. A few constellations may help orient a traveller. The moon alters the ground's visibility. clouds can close the sky again. Silence is never complete, but it deepens. The camp becomes a collection of small breathing lives held for a few hours beneath the same darkness. As the night deepens, even the fire changes character. Earlier it cooked food and gathered conversation. Now it asks only to be watched lightly. Its embers illuminate little more than the nearest hands and the edge of a vessel. The rest of the world belongs to darkness and sound, and as the camp enters its deepest quiet, we can return one final time to the same small fire with which our journey began. The fire has nearly settled into embers. A faint glow remains at the centre of the jar. The vessel beside it has cooled. Bedding has been unfolded. The felt walls soften the wind, though the wind can still be heard moving over the grass beyond them. Outside, the camp breathes quietly. A horse shifts its weight. A dog lifts its head and rests it again. The rounded dwellings have become dark shapes beneath the stars. Carts wait where they were left. Ropes hold their knots. The animals gather their warmth against the night. History often remembers Genghis Khan through scale. It remembers maps, distances, armies, and the political world that formed after Temujin became Chinggis Khan in 1206. Those events matter. They changed Eurasian history in ways too large to fit inside one quiet evening. But the world around the famous name was also made from repeated tasks. A hand tested a leather strap. A child learned how to guide an animal. Someone folded felt. Someone watched the condition of the grass. Someone poured milk into a bowl for a traveller. Someone remembered the route toward water. Someone kept a fire alive long enough for the household to rest. A mobile home is still a home. Its doorway can open toward a different ridge after a seasonal move. Its wooden frame can be dismantled and raised again. Its coverings can carry the scent of smoke from one campsite to another. Its objects can be repaired, packed, and returned to their familiar places. Continuity does not always require stone. The camp can be intimate and connected to enormous distances at the same time. A rider leaves the horizon and enters the circle of hospitality. A message travels outward. A merchant carries cloth across overlapping routes. A scribe folds a document. A household rises with the grass and water, then settles again beneath another sky. The steppe is quiet now. There is no need to follow the roads any farther tonight. The messenger can continue into the distance without us. The gathering beside the Onon can remain in memory. The larger empire can wait beyond the edge of sleep. For now, stay with the embers. The wind brushes the felt. A horse breathes in the darkness. Smoke thins into the night air, and beneath the wide and quiet sky, as the last fire settles into embers, we can leave the steppe to the night. There is comfort in leaving the story here, before the night is disturbed by another's departure. The camp has shown us enough. It has shown that a famous historical figure can be approached through the ordinary world surrounding him. It has shown that movement can be a form of rootedness, that a household can carry continuity across distance, and that the quietest labour can support the largest changes. Tomorrow the grass will brighten again. Someone will wake before the others. The fire will be encouraged back into warmth. Animals will begin to move. A rider may appear far away and grow slowly larger against the horizon. But none of that needs our attention now. The household is resting, and the road can remain empty until morning. Good night.
Thank you for watching Something About Sleep. Since you're clearly still awake, why don't you click on the next video and we'll see you there.